A classified Senate briefing regarding last weekend's airstrikes in Iran is set for today after it was postponed earlier in the week. Two sources tell NBC News that the White House is expected to send Secretary of State Marco Rubio, CIA Director John Ratcliffe, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, as well as General Dan Kane, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, to brief senators. Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard will not attend. A classified briefing for members in the House of Representatives is set for tomorrow. Joining us now, Democratic Congresswoman Abigail Spanberger of Virginia. She's the state's Democratic nominee for governor. I should also mention, in just a few minutes' time, we're going to hear from Secretary of Defense Hegseth as well as General Kane as they brief reporters from the Pentagon. We'll keep an eye on that for when it begins. Congresswoman, good to see you this morning. You, of course, spent time many years working in the CIA, so you're well aware of these intelligence briefings, but also these intelligence assessments. And that seems to be what is at the heart of this news conference we're going to have at the Pentagon in a short time, where there's going to be, with perhaps some pressure from the White House, an effort there to explain just exactly what happened, what was destroyed there in Iran. But walk us through this procedure here. Just how difficult is it to make these sort of assessments? How are they done?
Well, as a former intelligence officer, I was a case officer with CIA. And then when I was in Congress, I served on the Intelligence Committee. I think it's important to know that intelligence that's available is always related to a certain point of time. So it's always, the intelligence community assesses such and such information as of such and such date. And then typically the level of certainty that might exist, depending upon the sourcing, depending upon how that information was collected, depending upon whether various entities within the intelligence community agree and to what degree of certainty. And certainly from my time in Congress, I know that that was always the important question to ask. Like, what's the degree of certainty? How do agencies across the intelligence community agree or disagree? Where might there be differences among their assessments? Because all of that matters in knowing. You can never really know with 100% certainty. That's the nature of intelligence.
Yeah, no question there, especially in a place that's so difficult to reach, like this mountainside in particular in Iran. Congresswoman, talk to us about the idea of the War Powers Act, if you will, where a number of your former Democratic colleagues are really, and to be fair, a few Republicans as well, have really said, like, look, this you need congressional approval for this. The White House has, well, declined to agree. Just talk to us about how important is this step?
So as a former member of Congress, and certainly when I was in Congress, I focused on authorizations of use of military force. I co-led multiple efforts to try and ensure that we were taking off the books old, outdated, but yet still open authorizations of use of military force. Because we had found that between a sort of loose interpretation of the War Powers Act and a willingness to use outdated, old authorizations of use of military force, there's too much room for a president, Democrats and Republicans alike, to be able to move past what is Congress's constitutional authority to be the deciding factor in whether or not our nation goes to war. And certainly my expectation is that there will be significant oversight. And I think that this is a priority regardless of party, regardless of one's agreement with or disagreement with the president or the president's actions.
Congresswoman, before we turn to your race for governor, I just want to take a quick chance to ask you, given your background, do you think the president made the right call in taking this shot? There is early polling suggesting that Americans across the board, Democrat, Republican, are nervous about what's happened with these strikes. What do you think?
I think as a former intelligence officer, I'm used to making assessments with a lot more information, most of it classified. There is too much that I don't know to definitively say one way or another. My expectation and what I hope they will ask about during the classified briefings would be what was known at what point in time, what was the goal, the stated goal of any particular military strike, what have been the outcomes, what are our next potential steps, how much did our partners and allies know or not know, because my concerns are really about what comes next. Any isolated action, Iran is a state sponsor of terror. Iran has long been a national security risk to the United States, to Israel, to stability in the Middle East. And we also must have a kind of clear-eyed view of what could be the eventual possible outcomes of the strikes of last week.
OK, so as I mentioned, you're running for governor of Virginia. It's shaping up to be one of the most closely watched races this year, and it is seen as a key test for the Democratic Party as it tries to rebuild in President Trump's second term. And you're currently in the middle of a major bus tour across the state, visiting more than 40 cities. Good for you. I was wondering what you're hearing. As you travel across Virginia, what are the issues, if you had to rank them, the top 3 issues among Virginia voters at the moment?
Top issue, affordability. Affordability in healthcare, in housing, in energy costs, particularly in some parts of the state. We here in Virginia, like so many places across the country, have seen real upticks in our housing costs, lack of availability, and that impacts every community, our most population dense as well as our most rural. So affordability, the cost of living, that's number one. Number 2 is education and the possibility that exists in for our children. The strength of our public schools and what opportunities exist as they continue through those public schools and off into career or off to college. And then the third is a general level of uneasiness, in part because of so much of the chaos coming out of Washington, whether it's the upheaval, certainly that impacts so many Virginians. We have more than 320,000 Virginians who have chosen a career of public service within the federal government. And certainly so many of them have lost jobs or their jobs have been under threat. We have felt significant impacts of the trade wars that this president has started, as well as in a state where so much of our economy is really surrounding agriculture, number one, private industry. Conservation dollars have stopped flowing because Washington has pulled that money back. Research dollars to our public universities, much of that has been pulled back. The economic uneasiness and just the divisive, angry rhetoric coming out of Washington is kind of the landscape issue that I hear about in every corner of Virginia.
So, Congresswoman, you mentioned affordability as being top of the list there of concerns your constituents have. The same could be said for New York City and the mayor's race we just saw there with a real progressive, a socialist, capturing the party's nomination. Republicans have sort of rejoiced at that. He is obviously far to your left on a number of issues. Are you concerned that you'll be painted with that same brush, the sort of liberal socialist out of touch brush? Or do you think there's room for all of these views in the party?
So I do not pretend to know anything about New York City politics or the outcomes of that election. What I know is my state, the Commonwealth of Virginia, a diverse, a vibrant, a large state where we have prosperous Northern Virginia communities that are building and growing. We have beautiful farmland throughout the valley. We've got older communities that are kind of changing and growing that, used to be in industries that we've lost. And now those communities are working towards a rebirth. We've got the largest naval base in the world. We're leaning into renewable energy. Virginia is a really exciting place. And we are facing challenges that, I don't think are unique just to us as it relates to housing affordability, but I certainly recognize that as the candidate for governor, as I have been hearing about these issues from people across Virginia since I first started my campaign back at the end of 2023, and I have been rolling out my affordability agendas in housing and healthcare and in energy, I do know that many of the ways that I am looking to address these issues head on, both in concert with the state legislature through the General Assembly and legislative priorities and bills I intend to sign into law, but also through the work of the governor's office and the administration. So many of the policy agenda items that I'm putting forward are, very much specific to Virginia. And so what I know is that people across the board who themselves will say that they, Democrats, Republicans, independents, are coming to my events and saying that they're voting for me because they want someone who is focused on the issues that matter most to them and their families.
Virginia's Democratic nominee for governor, Abigail Spanberger, thank you very much for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me.